we're speaking today to Jern-Fei, who is one of the youngest Queen's Counsel, and he is originally from Malaysia, but he's practicing now in the UK. Good morning. Well, it's good evening where you are, Jern-Fei. Good evening. Thank you so much for speaking to us on the LITE Breakfast.
Good morning, Bel. Good morning, JD. It's a pleasure, and thank you so much for having me on your show.
Now, an article of you kind of popped out recently. This is like from a few years back, but I'm like, oh my goodness, we got to talk to this guy because I kind of remember your story, and it was just so inspirational for me, and we just had to have a chat with you, right? So, first question, I suppose, is which football team do you support in the UK?
Oh, wow. I think I might lose half of the listeners now because it's Manchester United.
Yes!
You have a diehard fan here.
Right, okay, maybe then I might be gaining actually listeners now then. I know I'm gaining JD support.
Yes, oh my goodness, you have really good taste, okay?
Now tell us, now Jern-Fei, you are the youngest ever appointed Queen's Counsel. Now tell us about the day when you found out that you were named Queen's Counsel. How long have you been practicing law then?
Well, actually, I have to start first, Bel, by correcting this is an assumption that I was the youngest. In fact, I was one of the, but not the youngest.
Oh, right, okay.
In my year. But I remember that day very vividly. In fact, we weren't expecting the results of the Queen's Counsel selection to come out that day. And I got an email whilst I was shopping for a Christmas tree, and it was, I think, a week before Christmas, and I was shopping around for a Christmas tree. I got this email from the Queen's Counsel Selection Committee that says the results are coming out today and at 3 p.m., so brace yourselves. And it was one of the most nerve-wracking few hours I had to endure whilst waiting for the results to come out. At that point in time, when I found out I was going to be appointed Queen's Counsel, that was back in 2017, December 2017. I had been in practice for only about 13 years, because if you exclude the time when I was training as a pupil barrister, I started practice properly from 2004. So it was about 13 years in practice up to the day I found out I was going to be appointed a Queen's Counsel or QC.
I think a lot of people do not understand what this means. What is a Queen's Counsel? Do you counsel the Queen herself?
You know what, Bel? It's not that far off from the truth, in the sense that, in the literal sense, Queen's Counsel stands for One of Her Majesty's Counsel Learned in the Law. It's quite a mouthful, but to abbreviate it, it's Queen's Counsel or QC for short. What we don't do is we don't actually, in fact, counsel the Queen, but traditionally or historically, we are one of the counselors in matters of law to Her Majesty the Queen. This is a tradition that dates back a long, long time ago. But in the modern context, those of us who are regarded as excellent advocates by an independent selection committee are awarded the kite mark of Queen's Counsel. It is typically awarded to the top 10% of the legal profession in England and Wales.
Nice. So are there like top 10% of the legal profession every single year? You have new Queen's Counsels, or is it just like a set amount of Queen's Counsel?
There isn't a fixed number of QCs at any given point in time. And the way that we are appointed QCs is, in fact, there's an applications process where if you regard yourself as having met the criteria to be appointed a QC, you apply. It's quite an ordinarily long process, because there is to begin with, there's a 65-page application form that we have to complete.
Good God, and what?
Up to 12 cases that we had conducted in the preceding 3 years, which can serve as evidence of our excellence in advocacy, both written as well as oral advocacy. And on top of that, we have to name up to 12 judicial referees, up to 6 practitioner referees, which are typically other QCs that you've either appeared against or you have worked alongside, and up to 6 client referees. and about half of those will be called upon by the selection committee for references to be taken. And if you are shortlisted, and approximately a third of those who apply are shortlisted, you are then invited for an interview for up to an hour with a pair of interviewers, where what they do during the course of this hour is they try and assess evidence of you having attained the kite mark of an excellent advocate, both in written and oral form, from the application form materials you've submitted, the questions they ask you at the interview, as well as, of course, the references they've taken from your referees.
Wow. So if one of those referees said, this guy's an idiot, he doesn't know what he's doing, what do you do?
That will be the end of your application.
Don't list him as a referee, right? But I mean, this is a long and arduous process. What kind of advantages do you get being named a QC?
That's a really good question, Bel. I think there are two advantages. One is in the sense of it's an objective demonstration, not so much to pre-existing clients who ought to know you, but perhaps to potential clients that you have been recognized as one of the leaders of your profession, and that you are recognized for your excellence in advocacy. It is certainly a means by which actual and potential clients can assess for themselves your potentiality to assist them with their cases. So that's one advantage. The other advantage is really one of the reasons why I applied to become a QC to begin with. There's a certain degree of pride that one takes in being appointed a QC, and a recognition that comes with it, especially when you're appearing before courts and tribunals, not just in England, but also in other jurisdictions. And there came a point in time where I was doing quite a lot of cases, and a new opportunity will come along, perhaps for a pre-existing client, someone I knew, and a growing number of people were saying to me, oh, you'd be perfect for this case, Jen Faye, but unfortunately, our team feels that the stakes here are very high, and erring on the side of caution, as a matter of risk management, we feel that we must have a QC on our team, and unfortunately,
right, okay.
Magic initials after your name. So it got to a stage where, I thought to myself, you know what, if that is what stands between me and a really exciting case, and I think the time is right, I'm going to go for it and see what comes out of it at the end of the QC applications process.
Right. So it's not like, it's kind of like you're not just a singer, you're an American Idol kind of thing. Right? It's a whole other level of respect that everyone will have for you, right?
Well, I never really thought of myself in that way before, but I like the analogy, though. I like the analogy, JD.
Most important question, as a QC, do you get to charge more?
Oh, yes.
Oh, wow. I think with every case, obviously, it's got its own unique characteristics. There are some cases whereby the stakes are high, and those are the sort of cases which probably by and large warrant or require a QC to be appointed, or rather I should say the clients feel that it's necessary for a QC to be appointed. Those are the sort of cases whereby it's not because you're a QC, but because the stakes are high and they need a QC. The person who then leads the team out into battle, so to speak of, is obviously someone who is more in demand. That is reflected in his or her remuneration on the case. But equally, there are other cases whereby, for different reasons, it's an interesting, exciting case, and I'd very happily do it, irrespective of what that remuneration is. I can think of a time when this is harking back to a time when I was not a QC, where there was a really interesting case which I did. And I did it, I think, for, I won't say pittance, but it was certainly for a very modest sum of money at the time, but it was for the experience and the exposure. It was a hearing before the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg. And hearings before the European Court of Justice are very hard to come by, even back in the day. And this was a really unique case whereby I was acting on behalf of a bank, and I appeared in the ECJ, where lined up against me were 5 member states of the European Union, including the United Kingdom,
Wow.
the UK, Germany, Ireland, Italy, and Denmark, who were lined up against me and taking the opposing position. So there was me on my own, and then I had all
The
these other
European Union against, oh yeah.
well, at least part of the European Union. So
Right, right.
those were the sort of cases whereby QC or no QC, I would have very happily done it because it was one of those exquisite, unique experiences that I just couldn't pass over.
But basically, after all that he said, because he had some really technical jargon, but yes, now that I'm a QC, I'm expensive.
Now, Jern-Fei, let's go back in time. Now, you were born and raised in PJ here in Malaysia. Tell us about your childhood. Have you always wanted to be a lawyer?
Well, when I was younger, I remember one particular episode where my siblings and I, we were joking with ourselves as to what we want to be when we grow up. And I said that I want to be a judge when I grow up. And until it was pointed out to me that traditionally you can't become a judge until you've become a lawyer. So I said to myself, well, in that case, it's sorted then that I will become a lawyer first, and then I'll become a judge.
That easy? Wow, okay.
At what age was that you wanted to be a judge?
Well, I think I was. Maybe I was in kindergarten, maybe sort of almost primary one, standard one, so 6-7 years old at the time, so fairly young, but not old enough to have a sense of what being a lawyer or being a judge, for that matter, in very broad terms entails. But truth be told, Bel and JD, I had a very ordinary, a very Malaysian childhood, and I say this with great fondness. I grew up in PJ, Petaling Jaya. In fact, I grew up in Section 5, Petaling Jaya, very close to University Malaya. I went to my neighborhood government school, LaSalle PJ. I had a great time there, and I think it was those sort of experiences growing up in PJ, just like any other ordinary Malaysian kid, which helped then form my view of the world and the sort of experiences which I then carried through when I went on to the United Kingdom and to study and then ultimately practice the law.
Yeah, but your parents must be so proud. I have a lawyer's son, in an Asian culture. My son's a lawyer. Like what did they do to support and encourage you in this career path?
Allow me to argue with them a lot.
It's practice, right?
Exactly. Practice makes perfect.
But why did you choose then to practice law in England and not back here in Malaysia? I know you went over to study when you were pretty young, right? After high school, was it?
Well, I did my SPM at LaSalle PJ. And then when I finished that, I decided to go to the UK to do my A-levels, in part because it was, I believed at the time, my parents and I believed at the time that it would be a better platform from which I could then apply, hopefully to a good university in the UK, to then pursue my further education. And if I'm being honest, Bel and JD, when I did my studies in the UK, even going through a law degree, and I went to Cambridge University, did my law degree there, and even against that sort of backdrop, it never crossed my mind to practice law in England, let alone to become a barrister. So a lot of my peers in the final year of their university degree at Cambridge or any other university would begin applications for pupillage, in other words, a training position at a barrister's chambers. So the plan usually is that you would apply in the final year of your university. Hopefully you secure an offer of a pupillage. And then the following year, you would then go on to bar school to finish your training, your professional training, or rather pre-professional training as a barrister. And then once you finished your bar school year, then you would then start your pupillage at a set of chambers. And when I started my bar vocational course, as it was then called, I was one of the few amongst my peers who graduated from universities, which a lot of us attended at the time, who did not have a pupillage. The other major exception being obviously overseas students who did their bar school year with a view to then returning to their home jurisdictions to practice. And I did my bar training that year, like many other Malaysian students, because it was a means of spending an additional year in London, but at the same time, it gave us an exemption even when we decided to return to Malaysia, not to have to sit for the Certificate of Legal Practice, the CLP exam.
Okay.
So I thought to myself, you know what, this is a great way of spending, just maybe prolonging my time in the UK for one extra year, do the bar training, go back to Malaysia or maybe some other country, and then either commence pupillage if that's what I wanted to do, or maybe do something else. But at least I would have done my bar school training, got that in my back pocket, and I wouldn't have to worry about qualifying as a barrister or as a lawyer thereafter. It was during the time when I was in bar school, and I looked around and I thought, you know what, there are a lot of my peers who I spent time at university with. I didn't think that I was any worse off a lawyer than they are, or any less an accomplished legal student, law student than they are. And if they could secure pupillages, then surely I must have at least a fighting chance of securing pupillage. Right. And this was back then, this was about 20 years ago. So this was 2001, 2002, where the world, the country was a very different place. And I remember thinking about applying for pupillage, and I asked quite a few people for advice and what they thought. And one of the pieces of advice that really struck a chord with me, and this person meant well, was he said, Jen Faye, it's a good thing, obviously, to dream big dreams. And I know that, you are considering applying for pupillage at the bar here in England. And I told this person, I said, there are a lot of these barristers' chambers out there who advertise themselves as being equal opportunities organizations who are willing to consider people from non-traditional backgrounds to become barristers or to be offered pupillages. And this person said to me, says, look, a lot of people say things and they mean well, but at the end of the day, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. If you look at the websites of some of these barristers' chambers, scroll up and down the website, the list of barristers, how many people do you see on that website who look like you and who sound like you? And, that really struck a chord with me. And I thought, you know what, that really, that really sort of hits home. But maybe because I have always been, and still am to a certain extent, very stubborn, very unwilling to surrender to what some might regard as fate or my, predetermined fate. I decided that I would give it a go. I have nothing to lose except for a little bit of dented pride, right, yeah, if I didn't get taken on. So I applied for pupillage, and I received several offers, much to my surprise. And I chose what I thought was the best offer, the best set of the bunch, which is the barristers' chambers. I'm now at Essex Court Chambers. And again, I remember there was one other set, again, they meant well, and they said to me, look, don't go to Essex Court Chambers, they said. It is one of the best sets in the country, and it's very difficult to get into. But even if you get into Essex Court Chambers as a pupil, what are the chances that you'll be taken on as a full-time member, what we call in our jargon a tenant, at the end of your pupillage year? Come to us. You stand far better prospects of getting a permanent spot at our set of chambers as a barrister member. And again, it was just one of those situations where I thought to myself, it doesn't really matter where I come from or what my background is. I believe in myself and I want to give it my best shot. If I do it and I fail and I fall flat on my face, so be it. At least I can say, hand on heart, I have tried. So off I went. I decided to throw caution to the wind and accepted a pupillage at Essex Court Chambers. I was so convinced when I started that I wouldn't be offered a permanent position at the end of it. I started making plans to return to Malaysia. But as the year wore on in my pupillage, and pupillage was a 12-month process, albeit they tell you back then at the 6-month stage whether or not you'll be offered a permanent position as a full-time member after your pupillage has finished. That as things started wearing on, I felt more and more confident about my abilities, and I started feeling that I could really fit into this place, the work I'm doing, and that in fact, the belief I had in myself, 1-2 years ago was not misplaced. I did think I had what it took to at least make a good fist of the pupillage. So much to my surprise, I was offered a tenancy or a permanent position at the end of that year. And after having gone through such an emotional roller coaster, just getting to that point in time, it seemed like a bit of a shame if I were to give that up. So
yeah.
Stay on, practice, but I have nevertheless kept in close contact with Malaysia, with Asia, with my friends. And I do a lot of work now in Asia, including Malaysia, in the course of my work. And up until COVID-19, I traveled a lot as a result of that.
Oh, speaking of which, was your job affected by COVID-19?
Yes and no. Typical lawyer's answer, right? I want the best of both worlds. Yes and no. Yes, it was affected in the sense that it had an impact on the way we carried out our work.
Okay.
And no, it wasn't impacted in terms of the volume of the work which I got. So the volume didn't dissipate. I remained as busy as I was before the pandemic struck, but it was just the way I did my work changed. So for example, whereas previously I would travel extensively to see clients, to meet up with my team, to discuss cases and to do hearings. Now, a lot of things are done via Zoom.
And you do hearings via Zoom as well?
Oh yeah, we do hearings via Zoom as well. In fact, I had one a couple of weeks ago whereby it was a 2-week hearing over Zoom where we had participants from 6, 7, 8 different cities. I've lost count now. All of whom participated in 2 weeks worth of hearings. We both sides had to cross-examine up to 11 factual and expert witnesses. And we did all this via Zoom, despite the fact that people were spread across the globe. And so, yes, my work was impacted, not in terms of the volume, but it was impacted in terms of the way I did it. But there were pros and cons with doing hearings via virtual hearing or via virtual hearing methods. Certainly, I had to adjust the way in which I conducted virtual hearings, had to obviously take into account the fact that I wasn't face-to-face with the witness I was cross-examining. They weren't in the same room, neither were the other participants, the other attendees at the hearing. But there are ways that you can deploy to make yourself an effective advocate, continue to be an effective advocate, and sometimes an even more effective advocate by taking advantage of certain features of virtual hearings that you wouldn't get in a live in-person hearing format.
Now let's get back to you being one of the youngest Queen Counsels from Malaysia, making us very proud. Are there any other Queen Counsel from Malaysia working in the UK right now?
Yes, I know of one, although I have to say, somewhat regretfully, I haven't met him in person yet, and he's Eason Raja QC.
Okay.
He is a slightly older generation than I am, does a slightly different field of work. He specializes in, I believe, transferee work, whereas I do a lot of commercial disputes. But certainly there are the two of us, and I don't know of any others who are Malaysian other than us both.
Okay, but did you feel any pressure being named QC?
Oh, I think there was a lot of pressure in the run-up to being named QC or in the process of applying for QC, because it was quite an emotional investment. The process of applying took the better part of a year because our forms went in the year before then. And I had in fact been planning for my QC campaign at least sort of 2 to 3 years before that, trying to accumulate my evidence, my experience, referees, cases, etc., making sure that I had the material I needed to apply to become a QC. Somewhat perhaps counterintuitively, once I found out I was successful in being, that I was going to be named a QC, I didn't really feel much of any stress from that point on, because it almost felt as if, I was climbing a mountain, I've sort of surmounted that mountain. And then what then came thereafter felt very natural. It might be because for a number of years, I had already been doing a lot of cases either on my own, or I was leading teams and I had QCs as opponents. And therefore, when I finally became a proper QC, I didn't really feel much of any added pressure as a result of that, because it just felt like a continuation of what I was doing. The only difference, I've now got the initials behind my name, and that was the only difference, really.
But does it feel like it's vindication for all those years of work that you've put in already?
Well, vindication is one way of putting it. I'd like to think of it as an endorsement.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and an endorsement, but yes, vindication as well, in the sense of, all those years of, taking a risk on yourself, believing that no matter who you are, where you've come from, that you can you can achieve even the most unlikeliest of dreams. So in that sense, it was a vindication, but at the same time, it was an endorsement, because it was very satisfying to know that there was a body out there, a selection committee that's meant to represent the wider profession in the country, who feel that you are of that sort of quality, so as to endorse you as a Queen's Counsel.
Okay. Oh, you've had a very good winning track record. I mean, what were some of the tough losses that you've experienced? Like, can you tell us more about maybe just one of your most memorable case?
Yeah. Oh, this is a tough one. I think, Bel, the possibly the most stinging, toughest loss I've ever had to stomach was the very first case I did in the county courts. So the county courts is basically the lowest rung in the civil court system, and it was a county court in a far-flung destination in the southeast of England, whose name I now cannot even remember. It was such a traumatic experience. What I do remember, though, was I was representing a credit card company, and I had been sent down to this far-flung county court to conduct a half-day hearing to try and recover a credit card debt. Unfortunately for me, my opponent turned out to be a litigant in person. So in other words, someone who was defending herself without any lawyers present.
Okay.
She was a single mother on benefits, and so she was unable to pay her credit card debt. And to make matters worse, the reason why she was unable to pay her credit card debt was because she had lost her job. She says she was unfairly dismissed. And guess who was her employer? It was the same credit card company.
Oh, no.
So you can imagine the scene was set, right? I turned up in court, and I thought to myself, oh dear, I think that the chips are slightly stacked against me. I might have a long side, but in terms of the sympathy of the court, not so much. So I thought I was being clever by saying to the judge, I said, I have my clients and I have much sympathy, as it were, for the predicament of the defendant, but a debt is a debt, and a debt must be paid where it is due. Which the judge said to me, it says, Mr. Ng, and this was back in the day when I thought, well, if someone can pronounce my last name, it's either they have a very high regard for me, or I am actually going to get a big rollicking. And true enough, it was the latter.
Oh,
he said
no.
to me, Mr. Ng, he says, any tears you or your clients shed for the defendant are but crocodile tears. You are just here for a pound of her flesh, aren't you? And then at that point in time, I was sort of, I pondered that for a moment. I was on the verge of saying, yes, but what's your point? I decided the better of it. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to bite my tongue. And I said nothing. I said, well, a debt is a debt, etc. It wasn't a great hearing, because whilst I got what I wanted, the order that I finally got was that the defendant should repay the debt, but over a period of something like 8 years, and it amounted to something like £5.70 per month or something like that.
Oh my God. So you can't remember which county this was, but you remember all the words of the judge. It must have affected you deeply, man.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, because I mean, as a lawyer, you have emotions too, and you sympathize, right, with your defendant.
You do. One of the things I have learned, however, is obviously to put your personal sympathies, whether for your side or for the other side, and leave it at the doorstep of the court before you enter and do battle. But one of the reasons why I remember that hearing in particular, Bel and JD, is because I learned a very invaluable lesson that day. And it was obviously that I'm here to do a job professionally in all of the cases which I do. And yes, sometimes life will deal you lemons. And, sometimes you will get knocked back, whether fairly or unfairly. But the important thing is not about trying to avoid those pitfalls, but knowing what to do when you do encounter them. These potholes in life, you pick yourself up, dust it off, and you start again. And, it was an invaluable lesson for me because it meant that the next time I get knocked back in court, I didn't take it personally. I didn't let it affect me. And what I did was, and, over the years, I became better and better at it, picked myself off, dusted it off, and got back again and started all over again and delivered what I was instructed to do.
Now, Jen-Fei, I'm sure you've become a role model to a lot of junior lawyers, especially the ones here in Malaysia, after reading your stories in the papers and after hopefully listening to this interview. What's your advice to them to sort of encourage them to be better lawyers?
I think my advice to them is, in fact, it's going to be very down to earth in the sense of work hard and don't leave any stone unturned. One of the things which has served me well over the years is the importance of being thoroughly prepared for any hearing, no matter how good you think you are as an advocate, or how well you think you know the subject matter, or how experienced you think you are compared to the lawyers on the other side. Always ensure that you are thoroughly prepared. Make sure that you are the person in the room who knows the most about the case, so that whatever happens, if and when it happens, and because life will deal you curveballs, you will know how to deal with these unexpected developments during the course of the hearing. Nothing can be truer than that when you are, questioning a witness, cross-examining a witness. I have never done a cross-examination before that has gone 100% according to script. In fact, more often than not, it veers off script. But the trick is, and this is what differentiates good lawyers from great lawyers, is knowing how to deal with these unexpected developments and not just coping with it, but making the most out of it. So preparation, preparation, and preparation is the key to success. And if nothing else, don't obviously give up on your dreams, because I certainly didn't all those sort of 20 years ago. And because of that, I have the pleasure of obviously speaking to you both now and telling you about my life journey.